In this episode of TSN, we'll tell you how Trump almost traded negotiations with Putin in Alaska for a trip to Russia. Also, about the military exercises in Belarus. Is there a threat to our border? And about new funding for the Ukrainian military. Which units will receive more? Subscribe to our YouTube channel, watch the broadcast, and be sure to comment on what you found most interesting. And here are a few important topics that will be discussed next. The summit in Alaska, where everything could be decided.
Right now, to be honest, we're trying to figure out the meeting schedule and other similar things, when the three leaders could sit down and discuss ending this conflict.
And how the United States is preparing to host Putin, while the Europeans want to make sure that they and Ukraine are also heard. 22 people injured, a bombed-out clinic and bus station.
It all happened instantly, quickly, unexpectedly.
In Zaporizhia, they are dealing with the aftermath of another Russian airstrike. Sumy region is under heavy shelling. In Sumy itself, the enemy once again struck the building of the regional military administration, and in the suburbs, a drone explosion set a field on fire. A hectare of wheat burned down. 40 rockets hit Serodina Buda. There are numerous fires there as well, and in the Shastka community, drones hit an infrastructure facility and agricultural warehouses. 2 people were killed and 11 were injured in Donetsk region. There is major destruction in Drushkivka. The Russians shelled it with multiple rocket launchers. The occupiers struck by Lazarsk with 8 drones, injuring people and destroying more than a dozen houses. There are victims in Mirnograd and Kostyantynivka. 7 apartment buildings were damaged there. The Russians targeted civilians in the Kherson region. 4 people were killed and 7 more were injured. At night, the occupiers attacked a civilian car near Krydyaya with a drone. A woman suffered blast injuries. 1 person was killed and 6 were injured in the Kharkiv region. In Pischeng, a 15-year-old teenager was wounded by shrapnel. In Kupiansk-Возlovye, an enemy strike destroyed a house. A man was killed and 2 women were injured. In Kupiansk, an FPV drone hit a car. A young man was injured, and another resident stepped on an enemy mine. He is in the hospital. And now there are already 22 people injured as a result of the Russian airstrike in Zaporizhia. The occupiers struck with glide bombs at the bus station and the university clinic, smashed residential buildings, businesses, and shops. The bus station suffered the most. Kira Oves will tell you more details.
We're now next to the bus station. It is almost completely destroyed as a result of the Russian airstrike. Utility workers are still working here. With the help of heavy machinery, they are clearing away the debris of massive concrete slabs. The moment of the enemy strike was captured by surveillance cameras. The footage shows that the Russians deliberately targeted the bus station with an aerial bomb. This happened at 6 p.m. during rush hour when buses at the station were preparing to depart. There were 11 people there, passengers, staff, and drivers. After the strike, rescuers pulled one of the victims out from under the rubble. The owner of the market stalls near the bus station recalls how it all happened.
It all happened instantly, quickly, and unexpectedly. I already survived an explosion 2 years ago. Back then, a shell from a tornado hit our house. So I know what that's like. Only the walls were left, and cracks appeared everywhere. The whole slab collapsed. As far as I know, they pulled someone out from under the debris there.
Right now, the #1 task is to clear away the destroyed structures so they don't fall on drivers and passengers. After all, the station, even if only in a limited capacity, is still operating. Whether it will be possible to restore the damaged building will be decided by the experts.
Many of the slabs have been damaged as a result of the airstrike. That's why we're now dismantling and removing all the overhanging structures that pose a threat to people's lives and health as much as possible. It will definitely take a few days. After that, we'll be told what to do next with this building, whether, well, to completely demolish it.
Starting today, buses are departing from the side lot of the bus station. We're setting things up now, and for the time being, we'll have a ticket office here outside to sell tickets to passengers, that's all. Otherwise, we're guiding passengers by phone about where to go, how, and what to do.
The Russians also struck the Medical University Hospital. At that time, there were about 100 people inside. Patients, doctors, and nurses managed to move away from the windows and go down to the basement level. That's exactly what saved them.
When it hit, the glide bomb struck a tree, and then the blast wave caused the damage. Fortunately, none of the patients were injured. Everyone was rescued in time.
About 200 windows in the building were damaged, and hospital wards and doctors' offices were destroyed or damaged. Some of the medical equipment is out of order or needs repairs. Due to the extensive destruction, the clinic is currently unable to provide medical care.
Since early morning, interns, staff of the medical university, and the clinic have gotten to work. They are clearing out debris, sweeping corridors and walkways covered in glass. All of this is to help the clinic resume operations as soon as possible. For now, all patients have had to be discharged and sent home. The blast wave and shrapnel also damaged about a dozen nearby houses. Utility services are working everywhere. Kira Oves, Andrei Hopovka, Zaporizhia, Tsen, 1+1.
The Russians have advanced in Donetsk region and occupied the settlement of Zadysa. This was reported by analysts from the Deep State Project. Over the past day at the front, according to the General Staff, there were 137 combat clashes. The enemy is pushing most actively in the Pokrovsk direction. There, our troops stopped more than 40 assault and offensive actions. More than 30 attacks were repelled in the Novopavlivka sector, in the areas of Zeleny High, Vilnpol, Mern, Voskresenka, Shevchenka, and Alhevsk. It was also tense in the Lyman, Siversk, and Kupiansk directions. Despite the difficult situation, Ukrainian defenders are trying to hold back the enemy. Just today, aviation, missile forces, and artillery struck 6 areas where Russian personnel were concentrated, as well as an air defense system and 3 artillery systems. And in these shots, fighters from the main intelligence directorate captured how they attacked the logistics of the Russian army in the Sumy region. The intelligence officers operate not only from the ground, but also from the air, detecting and destroying enemy targets with drones. Combat units will receive increased funding. According to the new rules, a brigade will receive 7 million hryvnias for each battalion participating in combat operations. In this way, brigade funding will increase by tens of millions of hryvnias. This decision was made today at the Supreme Commander-in-Chief's headquarters, which was chaired by Volodymyr Zelensky. Additionally, combat brigades will be able to use direct funding to purchase pickups, ATVs, and other equipment, both new and used. The procedure for decommissioning property will also change. It will become significantly simpler and digitized. Corps and brigade commanders will receive more authority, and the time frames for decommissioning will be shortened. And the award process is also expected to speed up. Donald Trump shared details about upcoming negotiations with Putin. At first, the American leader puzzled all the journalists present by saying he was planning to go to Russia. Then he corrected himself, saying that the talks would actually take place in Alaska. The US president stated that the meeting with the Kremlin leader would be a trial run, and that he would supposedly try to return some lost territories to Ukraine. In Trump's opinion, he will be able to determine within the first 2 minutes whether it is possible to reach an agreement with Putin or not. The politician clarified that he does not intend to make a deal between Russia and Ukraine because, to quote, "It doesn't depend on him, that Zelensky is most likely not going to be at the meeting in Alaska, and that he is concerned by the fact that the Ukrainian president needs constitutional approval to exchange territories." In Trump's opinion, and I quote, 88% of Ukrainians want a peace deal. The US president also mentioned Moscow's wars with Napoleon and Hitler and claimed that in 2022, the Russians could have been in Kiev in 4 hours if they had taken the highway instead of going through the countryside.
I can just go and wish them luck, and that's it. I can say that this issue will never be resolved. There are those who believe that Putin wants all of Ukraine, and by the way, I'm one of them. But I'm going to meet with him and see how things are. And then I'll call President Zelensky and the European leaders right after the meeting and tell them what kind of deal might be possible. I'm not going to make this deal myself. It's not up to me to make it. Both sides have to make the deal. So I would like to see a ceasefire and the best possible deal from both sides. I've seen polls from Ukraine. 88% of people would like to see this deal happen.
A meeting between Zelensky and Putin doesn't make sense before the presidents of the United States and Russia meet. This opinion was expressed by none other than U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. Meanwhile, there are reports that the White House is actually considering inviting the president of Ukraine to Alaska this Friday. At the same time, the U.S. is indeed working on organizing a trilateral meeting, but at a later date, Vance said in an interview with Fox News, how European and Ukrainian officials are consulting among themselves and with the Americans to have enough time to prepare for the Trump-Putin meeting. TSN's correspondent in the United States, Ol Koshelenko, has more details.
There are 4 days left until the meeting in Alaska, and there are more and more questions about what exactly will happen there, aside from the fact that Trump and Putin will have a one-on-one conversation. Last Friday, the President of the United States announced there will be an exchange of Ukrainian territories. Some of these areas will return to Kiev's control, while others will be exchanged. And the President of Ukraine, they say, should prepare for the fact that he will have to sign something. Volodymyr Zelensky responded, "You shouldn't count on that. There will be no territorial gifts to the occupier." But the intrigue over what exactly Trump meant remains. The Wall Street Journal writes, the main negotiator with Putin, Steve Witkoff, played a game of broken telephone. During a group call, he told European leaders that Russia wants Ukrainian troops to completely withdraw from Donetsk and Luhansk. After that, Putin is supposedly ready to freeze the front. But when it came to the Kremlin's ambitions for Zaporizhzhia and Kherson, Witkoff completely confused his colleagues, which led some of them to think that Russia was ready to return control of Zaporizhzhia and Kherson to Ukraine. The officials whom the Trump administration briefed by phone on Wednesday and Thursday were left with opposite impressions about whether Putin intends to freeze the current front line or to completely withdraw from these regions. An American official said that Putin is calling for a halt to the war along the current front lines in both regions, and then Russia will negotiate with Ukraine about a territorial exchange, seeking Moscow's full control over Zaporizhzhia and Kherson. It's unclear what territories Ukraine would receive in return. After Zelensky reiterated that he would not give the occupiers anything, the idea of territorial swaps as the basis for negotiations between Trump and Putin seems irrelevant. European leaders also signed a public statement which says, national borders must not be changed by force, and the path to peace cannot be determined without Ukraine. But U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, in a Sunday interview with Fox News, continued to insist, at the meeting in Alaska, some decisions will be made that won't make either Russia or Ukraine happy, but will allow them to live in relative peace. Vance called Zelensky's participation in Friday's meeting inappropriate, despite the fact that several American media outlets, citing sources in the White House, reported that this possibility is still being considered. The vice president stated that the United States is already working on organizing trilateral talks between Trump, Zelensky, and Putin.
One of the most important problems is that Vladimir Putin has said he will never sit down at the negotiating table with Zelensky, the head of the country. And now the president has managed to change that. Right now, we are, frankly, trying to figure out the schedule for meetings and other such things so that the three leaders could sit down and discuss ending this conflict.
As for what would guarantee lasting peace, if it is indeed established, that is not being discussed at this time. The Wall Street Journal cites a rather comical fact. Putin allegedly promised Erdogan that Russia would adopt some document in which it would pledge not to attack Ukraine or Europe again, a promise that European leaders viewed with great skepticism. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte stated on Sunday, Russia remains a long-term threat to them, and he advises treating the meeting between Trump and Putin as a kind of test.
On Friday, there will be a test of Putin by President Trump, and I commend him for organizing this meeting. I consider it important, and obviously, when it comes to peace negotiations, a ceasefire, and what will happen afterward. Regarding territories and security guarantees for Ukraine, Ukraine will have to be and will be involved. But on Friday, it's important to see how serious Putin is.
President Zelensky, in his communications with the states, is trying to walk a fine line. On the one hand, he tirelessly thanks Trump for his involvement, and on the other, he says Putin is deceiving him.
We understand the Russians' intention to try to fool America. We will not allow this. I really appreciate the determination with which President Trump is set on stopping the deaths in the war. And every day, many people are giving their lives. But the only root cause of these killings is Putin's desire to wage war and manipulate everyone he comes into contact with.
From Washington, United States, Olko Shalenko, Maxim Shinkarenko, TSN 1+1.
EU leaders want to speak with the US president before Trump meets with Putin in Alaska. The German agency DPA reported that this conversation could take place the day after tomorrow, on August 13th. The group call is being initiated by Chancellor Merz. Volodymyr Zelensky and other European leaders are expected to join the call. Europe and Ukraine have prepared their own counterproposal as a basis for peace talks with Russia. What does it include? Does it call for the withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from Donetsk region and all the details of the EU's response to the upcoming summit between Russian and US leaders, where, among other things, the outlines of future peace will be discussed? Coming up next from Radio Liberty's correspondent in Brussels, Zoriana Stepanenko.
Europe is watching the upcoming summit between the US and Russian leaders, which is being prepared at an unusually rapid pace, with clear anxiety. First and foremost, because neither representatives of the EU, who would like to join such talks, nor even President Zelensky, have been invited so far to Alaska, where they plan to discuss Ukraine and possible scenarios for ending the war. European leaders and top officials hope that, in the end, at least the Ukrainian president will be there. Chancellor Merz, in particular, has publicly pointed out the need to invite him. He likely mentioned this to Donald Trump as well, whom he spoke with yesterday. The leaders of the most influential countries on this continent, France, Germany, Poland, the UK, Italy, Finland, as well as the President of the European Commission, have issued a joint statement emphasizing that any diplomatic solution must take into account the interests of Ukraine and Europe. Ukraine, the leaders emphasize, has the right to determine its own destiny. In their view, constructive negotiations should only take place under a ceasefire, and the current line of contact should serve as the starting point for such talks. In this way, Europe makes it clear that it is against the withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from the Donetsk region. According to reports from numerous leading Western media outlets, this is the condition Putin has set for a ceasefire.
For us, the issue of Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty is not just a matter of solidarity with our neighbor, but above all, a matter of our own security. That is why, like all of you, I will be waiting for the results of the meeting between Presidents Trump and Putin. I have many concerns and many hopes.
Together with Ukraine, Europe has put forward its own counterproposal as a basis for peace negotiations with Russia. National security advisors handed it over to U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, whom they met with this weekend. According to this plan, the fighting must stop without any preconditions. Withdrawal of troops only on a mutual basis, not unilaterally by Ukraine alone. In other words, if Kiev withdraws from some territories, then Moscow, in return, must restore control to Ukraine over other Ukrainian lands that are currently occupied. The plan from Europe and Ukraine also includes ironclad security guarantees. Among the proposals that were mentioned was, in particular, potential NATO membership, but I should note that the United States has categorically refused this to Kiev before, both under the previous administration and the current one. The Secretary General of the alliance did not rule out that the future agreement may have to acknowledge Russia's de facto control over part of Ukraine's territory.
We have to acknowledge that Russia controls part of Ukraine's territory, and the question will be how to move forward after a ceasefire. It is possible that the future agreement will state that Russia de facto, in reality, controls part of Ukraine's territory. This should be a factual acknowledgement, not a political de jure one.
Further steps, in light of the upcoming meeting between the presidents of Russia and the United States, are now being coordinated by the foreign ministers of the EU member states. Kaja Kallas has called an emergency meeting via video link. The top EU diplomat does not believe that Putin is seeking fair negotiations. She believes he is flying to Trump only to avoid new sanctions amid the growing disappointment in him from the US president. Kallas emphasizes that Europe and Ukraine must be part of any agreement between Russia and the United States. From Brussels, Zoriana Stepanenko, Marek Hajduk, Radio Liberty, especially for TSN 1+1.
Does any European leader have a chance to get through to Trump? And in your opinion, whose opinion is the most authoritative for the American president, besides his own, of course? Be sure to write about all this in the comments, and also make your predictions about whether there will be any fateful decisions for Ukraine this coming Friday. And of course, give us a like. Subscribe to the TSN channel on YouTube, and I'll continue with the broadcast. We still have important things ahead. It's pointless to decide Ukraine's fate without Ukraine. That's what the Ukrainian president's office is reminding everyone. In a comment to TSN, the advisor to the head of the office, Mikhailo Podolyak, stated, "Our diplomacy stands its ground, Because right now, in reality, Putin doesn't want to end the war, so he's flirting with Trump to get the US to step back from resolving the conflict. All of this is to reduce support for Kiev in terms of resources. He adds that if, during the meeting between the American and Russian presidents, the leaders of these countries consider Moscow's scenario, then it's clear that the dominant party here will not be the United States. And in any agreements regarding peace in Ukraine, Ukraine itself must, without a doubt, be involved. It is also important to take into account the position of our European partners, which is already synchronized with ours, because in this war, after all, many countries are suffering, Podolyak explains.
That is, the American side can certainly play this game, but without synchronizing positions with Ukraine, without synchronizing positions within the Triangle of Europe, where the conflict is happening, namely Eastern Europe. Without Ukraine, it is impossible to resolve the issue of war and peace.
A new tranche from the EU from the profits of frozen Russian assets. Its amount reaches about 1.5 billion euros. The funds will go toward payments on Ukraine's loans from the European Union. This mechanism provides non-repayable support to help Ukraine pay off the macro-financial assistance loan from the EU, as well as loans from bilateral creditors. And this is already the third such payment since the start of the full-scale invasion. The first such transfer took place in July 2024, and the second in April 2025. Russian funds were frozen in the European Union at the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Although the assets themselves remain frozen, the interest they generate is promised to be used to support Ukraine in the future as well. Meanwhile, Armenia and Azerbaijan have published the full text of the peace agreement. The agreement was reached after decades of bloody conflicts and ethnic strife. The document was signed on August 8th with the mediation of the United States in the presence of Donald Trump. So, what does the peace agreement entail? First of all, the parties agreed to recognize and respect each other's sovereignty, territorial integrity, inviolability of international borders, and political independence. Both Baku and Yerevan confirmed that they have no mutual territorial claims and will not make such claims in the future. They also agreed to refrain from the use of force or the threat of force against each other's territorial integrity or political independence. They promised not to interfere in each other's internal affairs. They will establish diplomatic relations and will not deploy military forces of any third party along their shared border. The agreement will enter into force as soon as each side ratifies all documents in their respective legislatures. Donald Trump has declared war on the homeless. The American president wants to drive all the homeless out of Washington. As the politician explained, they will provide them with a place to live, but far from the capital. This entire special operation will be part of the fight against violent crime, which, in his opinion, is almost the highest in the world in Washington. According to Trump, he wants to make the city safer and more beautiful than ever before. To relocate the homeless, the US president wants to deploy the National Guard. The politician ordered the city police to be placed under federal control. And earlier, he made it easier for law enforcement agencies to arrest the homeless. Washington's mayor, Muriel Bowser, rejects Trump's claims that the capital is experiencing a crime wave. On the contrary, according to the official, this rate has dropped by 26% since the beginning of the year. A drone attack on the Artemis instrument building plant in Russia. The Security Service of Ukraine has revealed details of the operation. PSN sources report that the facility was attacked by at least 4 drones. This plant manufactures devices for the aviation and space industries, including components for Russian Kh-32 and Kh-101 missiles. Due to its activities in support of the Russian military machine, the enterprise is under Western sanctions. During the attack, according to local media reports, 1 employee was killed and 2 were injured. An explosion also occurred in another industrial city in the same Nizhny Novgorod region, in Zerzhinsk. There are also military-industrial enterprises there. Overall, Russian air defense forces claim to have shot down nearly 40 drones in 9 regions. Several hundred Russian soldiers and several dozen pieces of equipment have arrived in Belarus for exercises scheduled for September. This was reported on the United News, marathon broadcast by the spokesperson of the State Border Guard Service, Colonel Andriy Demchenko. This concerns the joint Russian-Belarusian military exercises. West 2025. At present, they do not pose a military threat to Ukraine, the agency emphasized. There is no observed buildup of a large number of troops for a possible offensive. At the same time, units from the intelligence services, the Ministry of Defense, and the State Border Guard Service, together with their foreign counterparts, are constantly monitoring the possible further arrival of Russian units on the territory of Belarus. Our military does not rule out provocations from the Russians during these exercises. European countries have also responded to the maneuvers. Despite the low assessment of the threat, Poland, for example, is conducting its own exercises. Lithuania is strengthening its air defense, Estonia is reinforcing its border, and Latvia is also taking appropriate security measures. At the same time, in a recent interview with Time journalist Simon Schuster, the self-proclaimed president of Belarus, Lukashenko, voiced a new version of the Russian Federation's invasion of Ukraine. According to him, there was actually no such invasion in 2022. It's just that after the joint exercises ended, Russian troops began to leave Belarus. However, near the border with Ukraine, they, this is a quote, at some point turned south and moved east toward Russia through Kiev.
At the moment, there is no significant threat in the direction of our border. There is no buildup or use of Russian forces, not even those that are just starting to arrive. The State Border Guard Service, as a component of our country's defense forces, is also, first and foremost, on par with our colleagues from European countries bordering Belarus, exchanging information about the need to respond to any actions that may occur from Belarus.
A powerful fire threatening a UNESCO World Heritage listed reserve. In Spain, efforts are underway to contain a forest fire in the north of the country. The fire is raging in the Castile and Leon region. Nearly 1,500 people have been evacuated there. Meanwhile, the flames have reached the Carricito Bridge in Las Medulas, both of which are UNESCO World Heritage Sites. This happened due to strong winds that are fueling the spread of the fire. In total, 7 active forest fires have been recorded in the region. The chances that they will die down without human intervention are extremely low, since the heat wave in Spain is expected to last at least until next Thursday. A powerful earthquake has killed at least 1 person and injured dozens in northwestern Turkey. The tremors, with a magnitude of 6.1, damaged dozens of houses and were felt in several provinces and even in Istanbul. Authorities assure that rescuers responded to the earthquake promptly and immediately began freeing people from under the rubble. And the deceased 81-year-old man died after he had already been handed over to the medics. At the moment, search operations have been halted. Officials have arrived at the collapsed sites to assess the damage caused.